Tell us a little bit about, I mean, you've shared that before your diagnosis, you were newly married, beginning to think about a family and still grieving your dad. How did all of that shape how the diagnosis hit?
Yeah, you bet. So in September of 2013, I was diagnosed with cervical cancer. And yes, all of those things were happening in the background. Literally a week before diagnosis, my husband and I were talking about actively trying to get pregnant and start a family. And the year prior, my father had passed away, and that was a very sudden loss. I think there's something very significant about losing a parent. It doesn't matter how old you are. I am the youngest of three. I am the baby. So losing a parent is very significant. And the grief of a sudden loss is also life altering, life changing. I had lost grandparents, I had lost maybe neighbors and family friends and whatnot, but to lose a parent is so significant, that foundation of who you are. And so the background is there's so much life happening at that point.
Let's go back to that pivotal moment you mentioned. You were sitting there clearly unwell, describing these intense symptoms, and the person who's supposed to be in your corner says that your experience bogs her down and then walks out. I honestly can't imagine what that felt like. It really gets to me when the very people we're supposed to trust with our care show so little empathy or presence. What happened inside you when that door closed emotionally, in your body, in the story you were telling yourself about your own healing? Was that moment more painful physically or emotionally, or what was it like?
Yeah, all of the above. So yes, during the 9 months post-treatment, I was still seeing my oncologists and being monitored, and I was really struggling and had an appointment with one of my oncologists. And just that, I expressed all of my symptoms, really was sitting there on the table, nearly tears in my eyes of like, I am not well. And my oncologist said to me, your symptoms bog me down. And she got up and walked out of the room. And I would say there was a huge crack inside me, a fissure, if you will, a true snap or breaking point. I felt lost. I felt, I had given my trust to my oncologist to go through those treatments. Again, chemo and radiation is no joke. My mind, it was mind boggling to be sitting in the world of oncology, knowing that so many people struggle after those treatments, and there was no support. There was no support. There was no, hey, here's our care team to really work on restoration now that you're done with active care. And it meant I also had to go find it. And that was a struggle in itself, too.
Have you ever faced a moment that changed everything? A loss, a new path, or an awakening that forced you to rewrite your life? Pivot Point is a podcast that explores those stories. I'm Nik Michael. We'll dive into how pain can spark growth and how crisis leads to clarity. Subscribe to Pivot Point today. Welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. I'm Nik Michael. Here we explore the moments when everything we thought was stable shifts beneath us, and when a single realization changes not just our circumstances, but how we understand ourselves and what it means to move forward. Pivot points don't always arrive as dramatic turning points. Sometimes they show up quietly, in the aftermath of crisis, in that disorienting space between being told you're okay and actually feeling whole. Sometimes the pivot itself isn't the storm, it's what happens after the storm passes, when you're left to rebuild and no one is there to show you how. Some pivot points ask us to trust systems that have failed us. Others ask us to trust ourselves when our bodies feel unfamiliar. And some pivot points force us to confront a gap so profound that we can't unsee it. The gap between survival and true restoration, between being declared well and actually living. Today's guest is Megan McGee. She is a registered nutrition and dietetic technician and certified mind-body eating coach. Megan works with people navigating autoimmune and chronic health challenges, people who have been told they're fine when they know something is deeply wrong. But Megan's work didn't begin with expertise alone. It began with experience. It began in a moment of profound dismissal, when the system that had intervened to save her let go before she was ready, before she was whole, before she understood what restoration would actually require. Her pivot point taught her something most of us never want to learn, that sometimes you have to become your own advocate, your own healer, your own fiercest ally, because no one else will. Megan's story is about what happens when the fire alarm is fixed, but the house is still burning. It's about rebuilding trust with yourself, turning dismissal into advocacy, and transforming pain into purpose. Today, she helps others navigate the complexities of health and identity through a more integrated lens, bridging evidence-based science with the emotional, relational, and spiritual dimensions of care. She meets her clients not as an authority, but as a partner in healing. This is a pivot point story, not about breaking, but about rebuilding, not about giving up, but about refusing to accept that cleared means healed. Megan, it's an honor to have you here. Your story is one that needs to be told, and I'm so grateful you're willing to share it with us here on Pivot Point Strategy for Change. Where would you like to begin?
Hi, Nick. Yes, thank you for having me. And
Hi.
yeah, we can just jump in. I'm so glad to be here. And I love the work that you're doing. And it just really spoke to me and speaks to me actively. You know, the one thing that I think of when I think of pivot point, especially in our life journey, is that sometimes these moments unfold and they're not per se what we're asking for. And sometimes that in itself can be the challenge for sure. And so I'm very much an optimist. I very much like to think about, what's on the other side and maybe what's the meaning behind experiences. Sometimes we don't always get those answers. And I feel like that was a lot of my journey, which I'm going to share with you. But it is amazing how once you make peace with maybe the situation and you move through it, your lens changes. Things open up. There's a different conversation to be had. So again, I'm just really happy to be here today and share my story and get to have time with you. So thank you.
I certainly appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about, I mean, you've shared that before your diagnosis, you were newly married, beginning to think about a family and still grieving your dad. How did all of that shape how the diagnosis hit?
Yeah, you bet. So in September of 2013, I was diagnosed with cervical cancer. And yes, all of those things were happening in the background. Literally a week before diagnosis, my husband and I were talking about actively trying to get pregnant and start a family. And the year prior, my father had passed away, and that was a very sudden loss. I think there's something very significant about losing a parent. It doesn't matter how old you are. I am the youngest of three. I am the baby. So losing a parent is very significant. And the grief of a sudden loss is also life-altering, life-changing. I had lost grandparents. I had lost maybe neighbors and family friends and whatnot, but to lose a parent is so significant, that foundation of who you are. And so the background is there's so much life happening at that point. I also really believe in the connection between how our stress directly impacts health outcomes. And that was a trauma for me, the loss of my father. And I do consider how that impacts my diagnosis, just how that chronic state of stress, impacts our bodies.
You're bringing up an important point with dealing with loss and how it impacts ourselves as a whole, our body, our mind. What was in the foreground for you most when all of this was happening? What was happening both cognitively, emotionally, perhaps
Yeah.
even, physically?
Yeah. So, from an emotional lens, I was in deep grief. Absolutely. The loss of my father. What I know enough of is to make sure and take time for myself. And that was a big place or space I had been in that for that year of taking the time to truly grieve the loss. I really believe in the idea that we need to honor our emotions, whatever type of loss we might be experiencing. I sought out different resources during that year to really work through. That was truly, again, the first true loss I had. And I wanted to take the time and go through that process. And I think that's a big part of my story in general. I like to access different tools and resources to work through different stages of life, and not from the lens of being lost per se, but really just wanting to have a place or a platform to work through different experiences, including grief and loss.
So back then, at the time all of this was happening, it must have been difficult for you then to have all this going on and to trust your body when your body had essentially, I remember all the treatment you had mentioned. Tell us a little bit about that and how that
Yeah,
impacted you.
absolutely. So fast forward, yes, in September of 2013, when I received the diagnosis of cervical cancer, I was completely caught off guard. I was shocked. That was not something I thought was on the radar in any sort of way. And I think for so many of us, including myself, when you receive a health diagnosis, there is a loss of trust of the body. My body has deceived me. My body has done something. My body has changed, and I don't know why. I haven't overtly done something. My body is doing its own thing. I'm not really in control of my body, which we often think that we are. And that can be extremely challenging. And I think that was also part of the hardship, I think, of beginning treatment. Starting chemo, starting radiation, trusting that process, trusting these very aggressive treatments to address my health diagnosis also felt very uncertain. And I would say as I moved into the cancer journey, just that very unsure footing of like, I'm taking steps, but I'm really swimming upstream right now. And how do I trust my
Mm.
body? How do I trust these treatments? How do I go through this process?
So it's unimaginable all the time when I hear stories like about what you've gone through. So what did it mean to come back to trusting your body after it deceived you
Yeah.
overall?
Yeah. That's such a big question. It's a great question, but it's a big
Yeah,
question. Yeah. It's a question I honestly ask all my clients as well as we work together of how do we relearn to trust the body?
yeah.
And just that, I think it is a very much a comprehensive conversation. It is mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. Life is going to unfold for us. Life is going to change. There are a lot of things that we are not in control of in our lives, but I think we can't stand in the lens of fear of our bodies, fear of food, fear of life events, fear of loss. I feel like I show up embracing life. I want to enjoy every moment of life, not stand from a place of fear.
Hmm.
But it took a lot of work to get through that. It really did to truly heal mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I think a big piece of it too is it takes a team. It takes a trusted
Mm.
team who can support you. I don't think we're meant to do life alone in any way. I think it was a combination of me taking the time, honoring that I needed the time to really deeply heal, but also to find the right team, which really came about after my active cancer treatment. My therapist, my physical therapist, my acupuncturist. There was a team of people who really supported me in getting well, if you will. And when I say get well, again, I mean all of it physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But I think it's really about taking that time to rebuild the trust and taking the time being the key piece of that. We can't rush through that journey. And we can't also just, sweep it under the bed that it didn't happen. Oh, well, I'll be fine. I think there's a process involved in that.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
You used a powerful metaphor in what I recall. The treatment fixed the fire alarm, but the house was still burning. Can you expand on what that meant for
Yeah.
you? Because that really struck
Absolutely.
me. I've never heard that
Absolutely.
before, which is
Yeah. Yeah. As I went through my active treatment for cancer, I did go through chemo and radiation. It was pretty aggressive. I did pretty well with those treatments, all things considered. I mean, they pack a powerful punch. And the
mhm,
blessing is that I am cancer free. They did what they were supposed to do in that way. Hallelujah. The other side, though, is because those treatments are so aggressive, I went into a full body breakdown 9 months post treatment. That was the part that was so disconnecting for me because 9 months of being out of treatment, I was doing a lot of things to work on my healing journey. And I thought just that. I thought I was healing. So 9 months post chemo and radiation, I went into a full body breakdown and my symptoms were intense. I was having chronic migraines that were really debilitating, impacting my ability to function. I was having deep fatigue, so struggling to get through my days. I was having severe blistering, especially on my hands. And the piece that still stands out to me is in the morning going to take a shower and putting my hand on the bar of soap. And again, I had blisters all down my palms and my hands just burning touching the soap. not the way you want to wake up in the morning. I was having digestive issues. So the active treatment of chemo and radiation, hallelujah, did what they needed to do. I no longer had active cancer, and I'm so grateful for that. But there was a complete explosion on the other side, a complete body breakdown on the other side. That is the fire that was still burning.
I think it's so well put the way you describe it. I mean, you were doing everything right. You were showing up for your appointments, following your care plan, and yet there was no pathway for restoration. And what did that reveal to you about really about our healthcare system? I mean, as far as what they define as success, I'm curious about that because I've worked in hospitals and very oftentimes people get discharged pre or, you know, pre prematurely. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. There's a gap. There's a huge gap. And in my mind, and I definitely function in a more holistic approach, but I think there's a gift of modern medicine. Thank God for modern medicine. When we have a true health issue, thank God for modern medicine. Having active cancer, not that I enjoyed chemo and radiation, but thank God for those treatments. Amen. But where the gap is what do we do about really regaining our health, regaining our vitality, living optimally, not just surviving? And that is where a large part of my pivot point came, is because there was a huge gap. The conversation from my oncologist was, well, you no longer have cancer. And there was almost a little bit of an implication in my experience of, what's your problem? You don't have cancer anymore. What are you complaining about? Well,
Like, what are
you're
you doing
right.
here?
Right. But I want to live now.
Yeah.
And I'm not
Yeah.
functioning.
Thrive.
I want to thrive. Yeah. So how do we bridge that gap of either a health diagnosis or going through active treatments and regaining our vitality? That is so much of my passion. And it's really what I experienced was that gap of, you don't have cancer, so that's the end of the story.
Let's go back to that pivotal moment you mentioned. You were sitting there clearly unwell, describing these intense symptoms, and the person who's supposed to be in your corner says that your experience bogs her down and then walks out. I honestly can't imagine what that felt like. It really gets to me when the very people we're supposed to trust with our care show so little empathy or presence. What happened inside you when that door closed emotionally, in your body, in the story you were telling yourself about your own healing? Was that moment more painful physically or emotionally, or what was it like?
Yeah. All of the above. So yes, during the 9 months post-treatment, I was still seeing my oncologists and being monitored. And I was really struggling and had an appointment with one of my oncologists. And just that, I expressed all of my symptoms, really was sitting there on the table, nearly tears in my eyes of like, I am not well. And my oncologist said to me, your symptoms bog me down. And she got up and walked out of the room. And I would say there was a huge
That's hard to
crack.
sit and listen.
Yeah. There was a huge crack inside me, a fissure, if you will, a true snap or breaking point. I felt lost. I felt, I had given my trust to my oncologist to go through those treatments. Again, chemo and radiation is no joke. And so there is a big level of trust, I think, that you're giving your power to the oncology community to go through those treatments. And again, I was still having to see my oncologist regularly, which in my mind means then you should be helping me. I am the patient. You are the doctor. I'm coming to see you. You should be helping me. And it was such a painful moment of, I am now flying blind. I am isolated. I am alone. Even with my expertise in nutrition, I thought I was taking care of myself. And again, having a full body breakdown 9 months later, I knew I needed more help. And here's the other thing. Even when you're an expert in your field, that doesn't always mean you want to do the work for yourself. And what I mean by that is I wanted a team. I wanted to be supported. In that situation, I was the patient. I didn't want to be the practitioner or the professional. I wanted someone to walk hand in hand with me to support me in getting my health back. And I wasn't looking for referrals of, well, just go see this doctor and go see that doctor and just we'll refer you anywhere. In my mind, it was mind-boggling to be sitting in the world of oncology, knowing that so many people struggle after those treatments, and there was no support. There was no support. There was no, hey, here's our care team to really work on restoration now that you're done with active care. And it meant I also had to go find it. And that was a struggle in itself too. I went and saw many other practitioners and was just not getting the support that I was looking for or needed. I saw traditional doctors, I saw functional medicine doctors. I think possibly there was also a gap because I have an expertise in nutrition and science and some of these things. I mean, one of the care practitioners wanted me to basically be his assistant and read through medical documents. And I was like, I have chemo brain so bad, I can't read documents and treat myself. That's not why I'm here. And so again, there was just this huge gap in supporting me in getting well. And it was really painful. It was really hard.
You're listening to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. If today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It truly helps others find the show and supports the work we're doing here. You can find Pivot Point Strategy for Change on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like a deeper dive into the work we explore on the show, I invite you to visit my Substack page, where I share in-depth articles and reflections. It's unbelievable what you've been through. How did food and nourishment play in helping you reconnect to your body?
Yeah.
Not as an adversary, but as an ally.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to answer that question kind of, it's double-edged. It's both sides. So initially, part of what was going on with me is the radiation had really destroyed my digestive tract. And that's why I was having significant food sensitivities, reactions to the foods. That's what was causing so much of my symptoms, my migraines, the blistering, etc. And that was another journey for me. I had to identify what triggers were. It meant I had to let go of some foods for a period of time, and I had to create a new relationship with food and a new relationship in my body. At that time, I was a vegetarian. I loved being a vegetarian. I felt so good as a vegetarian. And the biggest things I was reacting to was all my vegetarian proteins. So I had to go back to eating animal protein, for example. I hadn't eaten animal protein in 20 years at that point. That was a big change. I think the piece that I made and that I sit with even today, because there was a point of making peace with it all, is that I'll say it a couple ways. I believe in life, things are meant to change. That's not always easy, but I think that is the journey of life. Specific to food, I'll say that another way. I believe not every food is right for every body every day. And so as my diet changed, it was really about deeply nourishing my body to fuel my body, to help my body to heal. But it was also making peace that that needed to look different than what it was compared to 20 years prior, if you will.
I think those of us in the helping professions often don't realize how much a personal experience like this reshapes everything, not just our skills, but our perspective, our priorities, and the way we listen. Did you notice that shift in yourself when you returned to your work? And how did that change not just what you offer, but how you offer it? I'm curious.
Yeah, it really did. I think going through that experience allowed me to think about how I worked with my clients and to step back and to really consider that. I believe as I work with my clients, multiple things today. I believe number one, deep listening is so key. And I think that is why my clients enjoy working with me and come to work with me, is that I listen. I think in life, we all just want to be seen and heard. And especially when we're in a health compromised state, we want to be validated. So I deeply listen. I ask questions. I want to offer my clients everything I can give them and or resources. If I can't help, I want to find resources that can help. My vision is really bridging that gap. And that was what I wished during my journey. I wanted someone to support me in bridging the gap of truly getting my health back. Once I got my health back, it's also I shifted my practice to focus on working with clients with autoimmune conditions. And it is what I hear all day long. Either I have a health diagnosis, but I still don't feel good and I'm not getting answers, or I don't have a health diagnosis, but I'm very aware something is not right, but again, I'm not getting answers. And so my experience, I think, has really brought that. I have ridden the ride of autoimmune, of struggling with food sensitivities, of not feeling my best, of really struggling to function. And I hold that on my heart, and I hold that space for my clients now, because if we don't fall in the medical model, then we we don't get the answers and we often get dismissed. And it is kind of well, here's your diagnosis and here's your medication and that's it.
Yeah, I know that you like to blend both Eastern and Western philosophies in your approach. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I do. I think that's important. I really do. So when we think about that blend, I think there's gifts in both sides. Again, thank God for Western medicine, especially if we have a health condition, a chronic health change. Let's know the science. Let's know the biology, the physiology. Let's know what's going on in the body and the pathways and what we need to do to support the body in a health change or a health challenge. I also really believe in more of the Eastern side, we'll call it even the holistic side, if you will, because I think that's often what plays more, I'm going to say from the lens of our heart and who we are, the psychology side, if you will. When I think of my clients is mind, body, spirit. It's not just, oh, well, your labs say this, so we must do this. I believe in thinking about our daily stress, our past experiences, traumas, how those things directly impact us present time. I believe in the power of stress. Research proves that 5 years prior to any diagnosis of autoimmune, there's been some type of trauma or life event. We cannot ignore that. As I work with my clients, they love that we do the biology side. Let's look at labs. Let's look at, the underlying pieces. What allows them to thrive is, I'm going to call it that Eastern side, the psychology side, the more holistic side of how do I ultimately make peace in my body, make peace with my food, and how do I thrive? And that's not just about lab results.
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking how fortunate your clients are to be working with you
Thank you. Thank
and
you.
how just you're looking at the person as a whole and you're respecting both worlds. This experience seems to have deepened your commitment to integrating both Eastern and Western approaches in your practice. What did you learn in your own healing that made that bridge essential rather than optional?
Again, I was so blessed to be cancer free, and I celebrate that every single day. And again, that is the Western side. Thank God for those treatments that allows me to continue to live cancer free. I'm so blessed. And I truly do think that every day. But to really regain my health, Western medicine wasn't doing it. And again, the door even got shut in my face. It was more of the Eastern medicine that allowed me to truly heal as a person, not my biology, my mental, emotional, spiritual, who I am as an individual. My therapist, my physical therapist, my massage therapist, working with other health practitioners, learning more around nutrition and how to support the body, doing more studies and research in that way. It was about my heart that needed to be healed. It was about my spirit that needed to be healed. And that's not in a textbook. We're not going to find it in a textbook.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is where I'm saying that this is where the feeling I get, the sense I get is that when someone comes to you, they're looking for what you're offering and you're offering something that is unique and something that is going to be a pathway to developing a greater understanding and a program and a plan to get the results they want to improve their life after the diagnosis, which is the most important
Yeah.
piece of it all. Where do you encounter the greatest resistance and the greatest possibility in combining those two worlds, the Eastern and
That's
Western
such a great
approaches?
question. And
Curious.
yeah, that's a great question.
Because people can be open, and then they could also be reluctant and curious.
What the place that I'll say it this way, actually. The when by the time my clients come to see me, they are
Hmm.
at their wits' end and they will do whatever I recommend, which is a beautiful thing, but also unfortunate that to that point. So I don't per se get a lot of resistance. When a client comes to see me, they're ready. Show me the way. So, but where the biggest resistance or challenge I think comes in is that when you play in the pond of more Eastern medicine, it's not fast. When we
Yeah.
think of
Yeah.
Western medicine, we usually want fast. I have strep throat. I
Yes.
take an antibiotic. Within a week, I'm back in business. Fast, right? When we play in a more Eastern medicine philosophy, if you will, it's about the long game. It's a slower process. I also truly believe, though, that is what we need. As a culture, we have moved into this high stress approach, the chronic overdoing. It's what keeps us in sympathetic dominance, that fight or flight. That is what's keeping us sick, is that chronic stress, that chronic fight or flight response. Parasympathetic is rest, digest, and heal. But it's changing our mindset, asking a client to slow down, to take time in the healing journey, to make space for themselves, to practice stress management, to take time to cook, to take time to eat and not just shove food down, to take time. There's a word there, time. That can be very challenging in a world that we have not set ourselves up for success around taking time for self-care. We have chronic expectations in all different ways that we have to move faster, do more, have a longer to-do list, and get it all done. I think that's where the biggest challenge is, of how to make that sustainable, of taking time for our health and our care. That, I think, is the hardest place for sustainability.
Well said. Well said. Because Eastern medicine oftentimes is preventive, and people don't understand the long game is what you're talking about, not the pill fix or treatment fix, whatever that might be. So today your work focuses on people who feel dismissed, undiagnosed, or unheard, living in that same in-between space that you once occupied. How does that lived memory shape every client interaction that you have?
It's what gets me out of bed every morning. It is my driver. It is my why. It is my why.
I thought so.
The, yeah,
I was waiting to hear that. Your why. And
the
then
the that deep fracture I felt when my doctor walked out of the room, that sticks with me, and I don't hold, let's call it, anger towards that anymore. I really use it as the lens of, I just don't want anyone to ever have that experience. I don't want to know that there's people in this world who either have a diagnosis or don't have a diagnosis, but they're not getting the answers, or they're not reaching as optimal health as possible, even with a chronic health change. It is my why. And I hear it all day long with my clients, and the stories I hear, Megan, it's been 5 years, 10 years, 20 years I haven't felt good. And I have gone to my doctor. I've seen every doctor in town, and nobody has helped me. And that, I believe in thriving. I mean, if we're going to be on this earth and living, well, then let's do it. Let's thrive, whatever that means. I got to get through the things I have to do in a day. I get to do all the fun things I want to do, but let's do it. Yeah. So it really is my heart and my passion. It is my why. It is why I get out of bed every day. It really is.
I appreciate hearing that. For those listeners who have or know or have experienced or know others who have been medically cleared but still feel deeply unwell, what is the first mindset shift required to start truly healing?
Trust yourself, meaning our body has the innate wisdom to tell us if something is not right. Just because you've maybe been to the doctor and maybe you've been dismissed and told, hey, everything looks great, we'll see you next year, don't take that answer as the final answer. Fight for yourself, advocate for yourself, trust your body awareness. Trust that if you recognize you don't think you feel your best and you think something is off, you're probably not wrong. But trust yourself, advocate for yourself, push, keep asking questions, keep asking your doctors for more information. And if you're not getting it, I don't love just doctor shopping, but my point is keep searching, keep going, keep looking to get those answers, and don't let someone else dictate that you are well or not well.
You answered my next question. What would you say to someone right now who's sitting in their own exam room feeling dismissed and alone? That's exactly it.
Yeah.
If you could go back to that exam room and speak to that version of yourself who had just been dismissed, what would you tell her now?
I think the first thing I would want to do is give her a big hug and just honor the experience. Truthfully, that's where I sit, is just the emotional heartache of that situation. And so, but what I would also want to say to myself then, because I couldn't see it in that moment because I was not well, is there's a future ahead. There is health ahead. There is a life ahead. There is thriving ahead. And to keep going and to keep advocating, take the time to heal, keep finding those strategic people in life that are going to help you get there. But just that, fight for it, keep going, and there's a world ahead.
If you had to distill your pivot point into one guiding truth, the principle that drives both your life and your practice, what would it be?
Mm, I love that. That's such a great question. And I think the thought that comes up to me is life is a constant journey and things constantly change. Whether we want things to change or not, life unfolds for us. We continue to have different versions of ourselves and we continue to rebuild. And I think the rebuilding is also the growth. It's what makes us stronger, it's what defines us. It's what allows us to move forward. So I think that rebuilding is really the idea here of thinking about what is working for us, thinking about what's not working for us. Sometimes easier said than done, for sure, but allowing for that growth to become the best version of ourselves.
So well put. I'm just taking all of it in. It's just so wonderful to hear the way you're putting it. Again, I'm going to repeat again how the care that you provide, the attention to the detail, to working with your clients in a holistic way, and both approaches, both Eastern and Western approaches, and the experience that you've had, and of course the professional experience you've had. I just imagine how fortunate those that are in your care are. And it always, part of what is great to hear when you're in a healthcare in field or in a clinician somewhere, you want to hear wonderful stories. And you didn't allow anything that happened to you prevent you from your journey of healing yourself. And you're a true, have walked the walk, model for others to live with and learn from and follow. Because that's the hardest part. You're in it for the long game, and you're in it to make sure that they have the best experience they can have about what you can offer. So that itself, it's just like, I can go on and on with that. Megan, thank you for naming what so many feel but rarely say, that healing doesn't end with survival. It begins there. What you've illuminated today is a truth that our healthcare system too often overlooks. Being declared well is not the same as being whole. Your pivot point reminds us that survival may save the body, but rebuilding saves the self. Your journey reframes recovery not as a checklist, but as an act of profound courage. It's about advocacy when the system stops listening. It's about education when information is withheld. And it's about compassion, the kind you needed and didn't receive, and now offer to every person who walks through your door. Your work stands as a response to dismissal. Your presence offers what so many people are desperately searching for: partnership in healing. Megan, what I appreciate most about your story is that it doesn't end with being let down by the system. It begins there. You took that pain, that frustration, that abandonment, and you transformed it into mission. You became the practitioner you needed, and you bridged the Eastern and Western care because you know firsthand that no single approach holds all the answers. And you walk alongside people in their darkest, most uncertain moments because you remember what it felt like to walk that path alone. You've given us a powerful image today. Sometimes the fire alarm is fixed, but the house is still burning. It gives me more of an image now and a true meaning for what that means. That's where real healing begins. That's where true change starts. Megan, I just want to thank you once again for speaking on Pivot Point Strategy for Change.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me to share my story that still touches my heart, but in a different way, and is so much of my passion and my journey ahead. Yes.
And I look forward in the future, if there are other pivot points that you might feel important to share, or any other work that you're doing, I welcome you to return to join us here, and I'm sure it will be a great value for everyone to listen again. Those listening who are navigating their own recovery, who have been told they're fine, but know something is deeply wrong, Megan's story offers permission to trust yourself, permission to advocate for your needs, permission to demand partnership, not dismissal. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Pivot Point Strategy for Change. Until next time, listen to your body. It's not betraying you, it's speaking to you. And your pivot point might be the moment you finally choose to listen back. And now Before we close, I want to leave you all with one question that I like to ask at the end of every episode. What's your pivot point?